I had an experience at a stoplight that made me realize that this was where almost all of my mental energy was going. I was driving down Wade Avenue in Raleigh. Everything is fine in my world. I'm by myself. I had the windows down and I was singing a Dream Lover by Mariah Carey. And I pull up at a stoplight, and on this side of me is a car of black women, and on this side of me is a car of white women. And at this stoplight, I freaked out because I didn't know whether I should try to be like the white women or the black women. And it wasn't these women in the cars. It wasn't anything they were saying. It was my identity crisis at a stoplight where everything was great in my world. And all of a sudden I freak out because I don't know who to try to belong with.
This is Uncommonly Remarkable. We have surprisingly casual discussions about the lives and notable accomplishments of community leaders, entrepreneurs, and everyday folks like you and me. Think of this podcast as an opportunity to learn something new and to pick up on an entrepreneurial tip or two through open conversation. I'm Artis Beatty. I'm a doctor of optometry and the chief medical officer for My Eye Doctor OD. Though we will inevitably touch on topics within my area of expertise, the opinions and conversations held here are separate from my work with My Eye Doctor. Welcome to the show. In this episode, we dive into the heart of belonging and the power of genuine connection. We're thrilled to welcome Wendy Gates Corbett, a trailblazer in organizational culture and leadership. Wendy's journey is a compelling and inspiring one. From her early life as an adopted child who grappled with the feeling of being different to her extensive career in corporate training and presentation consulting, Wendy has transformed her personal experiences into a mission, creating workplaces where every individual feels seen, heard, and valued. In our conversation, Wendy shares insights from her groundbreaking work, including her role as an adjunct professor at Duke University, where she teaches tomorrow's leaders the vital skills of connection, respect, and protection. You'll also hear about her innovative research on simple, everyday behaviors that foster a sense of belonging to any organization. And don't miss out on learning more from her best-selling book, The Energy of Belonging, 75 Ideas to Spark Workplace Community, a practical guide packed with strategies to build inclusive environments. Let's get started on this transformational journey toward creating spaces where everyone truly belongs. Welcome, welcome, welcome. I'm so excited to have you here on the show today with me.
Artis, I am so excited to be here. I am like giddy.
We have so much to talk about. It's unbelievable because I have been thinking a lot about your book lately.
Really?
And I have been because there's been a little theme going through some of my shows, and it's very interesting for me to start to draw the line between some of the conversations I've had. So as an example, I had a conversation with a woman named Amy Vale, who is the founder for the Cubs, which is a foundation for foster children. And one of the themes was the need for belonging for foster children and the need for safety. And that was kind of the building block for the Cubs. Wow. And as I was kind of going back and thinking about that conversation, reading your book and kind of thinking about it, I was like, man, this is going to come, and I didn't plan it that way. So this is going to be great.
This is going to be great because you know how when you're going to be a podcast guest, there's a suggestion to listen to a couple of the podcasts.
Yeah.
And Amy's was one that I happened to listen to. And I was like, oh my gosh, like total fangirl.
Oh my gosh, that is awesome.
So we have a lot to talk about in terms of belonging and foster children. For me, belonging, my whole thing with belonging started with the fact that I'm adopted. So I was a foster child for the first 4 months of my life. So
the web is more connected than I even thought about, right? So, it's very hard sometimes for me to figure out where's the best place to start. So often it's best in the beginning. So you've had a career that has spanned a long time.
Yes.
And belonging is where you are now. You worked with presentations and helping people. I laughed so hard. Something that you were either in or that I read, you said you were ridding the world of bad presentations.
Yes, one slide at a time.
So, can you talk a little bit maybe about your career journey? That'll help us kind of set the stage for the
Mhm.
rest of the conversation.
Yeah, it is quite a windy journey, but it ends up where I'm supposed to be, and it actually now marries with a lot of my upbringing. So it all comes full circle. So I'm really excited to see where it goes from here. But career wise, when I was in undergraduate school, all through undergraduate school, I was completely convinced that I wanted to become a therapist.
Oh,
I was eventually going to get a PhD in clinical psychology. So I was a psychology major, and I just knew all through college that that's what I wanted to do. At the time in the early 90s, um, graduate programs wanted students that had some life experience.
okay.
So I spent 5 years doing substance abuse counseling with the idea that I would do this for a few years and make my graduate application stronger. Well, in that 5 years, what I discovered is that I didn't wanna be a therapist. Um,
Sometimes that
and
happens,
it
right?
well, I am so glad that it happened, but at the time, I felt like I had made a wrong choice
Mm,
because I had been so clear,
yeah.
and then I ended up being so burnt out, and my heart was just I could rationalize that, I needed to leave work at work, and a patient's success wasn't my responsibility, and a patient's relapse wasn't my responsibility.
Mm,
But my heart just, my heart couldn't do that. So I actually reached out to the professor who had been my advisor in undergraduate school. And I reached out to him and I said, I need some advice. I need some advising because I feel like I made the wrong choice. And now I'm
wow.
second guessing like every other choice I'm
Right.
making. So he said, "Well, Wendy, what do you really like about what you're doing?" And I said, "I really like training the new counselors because that was rewarding. I could see those skills develop, and those outcomes were usually more consistently positive. And I also was really fascinated with what I now know as organizational culture
Mhm.
because I worked for this treatment center for 5 years. I had the same boss the whole time, but there were 3 different executive directors because this is 3. 3 different executive directors because there was a merger of 2 treatment centers. So when I first started, there was one executive director, then the merger, there was an interim, and then they figured out who the new executive director, permanent executive director would be going forward.
Okay.
Under all of those 3 leaders, the culture was really different. And I tuned into that and I got interested in what creates or what influences culture. So my advisor said, well, there's a whole field of psychology that studies the workplace. It's industrial and organizational psychology. And I was like, oh,
Oh,
yay.
wow.
Yeah. So it was training. Essentially, it's what I focused on was corporate training. And I got a master's in industrial and organizational psychology with a focus on training, with the idea of getting into corporate training. And I did. So I got a master's degree in organizational psychology. I describe it as organizational psychology because the industrial throws people off,
Yeah, that
myself
makes sense. Yeah.
included. And I spent 20 years working with um, technology companies running their client training programs. So once a company bought the software, it was me and my team that would help them take it out of the box.
Got it. And so now you're in training programs,
Mhm.
and is this where you started to identify with presentation skills?
Well, yes, and in part because when I envisioned getting into training, I was not a technology person.
Hmm.
But the first job that I got happened to be with a tech company, and so I just kept. I'm on this road. This is where I'll go. So towards the end of that career, I had some experiences where there were people that I really respected and believed what was coming out of their mouth. I respected what they were saying, but their slides and their handouts were so bad that I
Oh
questioned
boy.
them.
Yeah.
And so what their expertise and the tools they use to deliver that expertise There was a mismatch. And what I remember about those people is their slides, their presentations. That's that mismatch. And once that happened that started happening, I started to see it everywhere because there are a lot of bad slides in this world. So I ended up deciding to create a business that would rid the world of that disconnect, because I decided that I want people who have a message and who have developed their expertise in delivering that message. I want their tools to match the quality of their tools, to match the quality of their message and the quality of their expertise.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
And that's it's such a tragedy when you have a great message and that you're trying to deliver, and people are distracted from the message by what
Exactly.
you're supporting the message with, right?
Exactly.
And so, and it makes me laugh because I think about my slide presentation skills. Like if I'm making the slide, it's probably not going to be that great because I'm a blank slide kind of guy.
Mm-hmm.
Like, because I really want to be able to tell the story
Mm-hmm.
and talk about what's important without necessarily having a lot of things there. But it can be distracting if you're trying to remember key points, or if you're trying to emphasize something that's extremely important, not to have that in place, right? And
True.
so it's very, very real.
It is.
This situation.
It
Wow.
is. It is.
Wow. So you were involved in the training aspect, and you were looking at organizational culture. What prompted the shift from training to really helping to think about organizational culture on a larger scale, and how organizations are put together and include people in that?
Well, as I was getting my master's degree, I did a lot of studying about organizational culture. And then my first job in the tech space, I kind of put all the organizational culture stuff on the back burner.
Okay.
So, um, as I started progressing in my career doing presentation consulting and presentation design and training, I decided I wanted to niche and focus on supporting professional speakers, because my thought was I could help make the world a better place by helping people who had a motivational message help their message land more strongly. So I started focusing on supporting professional speakers. I actually joined a Toastmasters club with the idea that I wanted to be a fly on the wall. So there was a particular Toastmasters club in the area that focused on professional speakers or aspiring professional speakers. So I joined this Toastmasters club really because I wanted to better understand my client and the process they were going through as they were honing their message and trying stuff out and figuring out, coming to their final, the final delivery.
Yeah.
So I joined this Toastmasters club. I had been a member of it for probably about a year.
Okay.
And literally every week there was a clipboard that was passed around. Who wants to speak next week? Who wants to speak next week? Every time I got the clipboard, I just passed it on to the next person. And it was at the year mark where somebody said, "It's your turn to speak, Wendy. You can't just be a fly on the wall here." So I started working on a presentation that started telling my personal story about belonging.
Okay.
So this Toastmasters Club did a showcase once a year where several of the members, several of the speakers, we did a public presentation. We did a public show, and I was one of the speakers one year. And then I got a gig from that presentation, and I started speaking about telling my story about belonging and how I spent a long part of my life, most of my life at the time, were not questioning whether I belonged.
Well, let's talk about that just a little bit, because, and this is where I think my conversation with Amy really does correspond,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so in that conversation, I learned a lot of things that I really didn't understand, like the need for stability, the feeling of safety, feeling like you actually belong. We even talked about that children need 8 to 12 hugs a day,
Yes.
and how important that is for development. And so, in your case, how old were you when you were adopted?
I was adopted at 4 months old.
At 4 months old.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so you were in foster care prior to that,
Mm-hmm.
and then you were adopted.
Mm-hmm.
So, um, did you know you were adopted? When did you learn you were adopted?
I've always known I was adopted.
Okay.
So I'm biracial. My biological mother is white. My biological father is black.
Okay.
I was given up at birth. And so from birth to 4 months, I was in foster care. My adoptive family, if I refer to my mother or my father, they are my adoptive father.
Mm-hmm.
And I say that only because sometimes people question.
Sure.
I was adopted at 4 months. The family into which I was adopted, they had 3 boys, and they wanted to make sure that their 4th and final child was a girl. So they adopted me. So my family is white, and
Okay.
we lived in predominantly white neighborhoods. So I've always felt like I belonged in my family.
Mm-hmm.
That's never been a
Not a
question to
question.
me. It's always been all of our normal. But I always felt like there were neon signs from the rest of the world looking at me, thinking that I was different. I always felt like I looked so different. And that was solidified and really planted a seed in my brain. The girl who did that was my next door neighbor. So we had a family that lived next door, and we were friends. They had 3 little girls, and I would play with them, and we would be fine and thick as thieves, and then we'd get in a fight and start bickering with each other. And when we'd get in fights, the one next door neighbor, Laura, would say, "You don't belong here, Wendy. You're different." And
Oh,
I
wow.
internalized that belief. Like, she would say it over and over again. That became a guiding belief. Like, I didn't know that it wasn't conscious for me, but that was how I lived my life, with the belief that if you think I'm different from you, then I won't belong. It wasn't you saying that.
Mm-hmm.
It was my brain thinking that's what the case was. So all through elementary school, through middle school, high school, college, I was always trying to convince every person I was with that I was like them, that I was the same as you, or I was the same as you. I was the same as you. So sometimes there were times in middle school where I hung out with kids who didn't do well in school. I was a smart kid, but I would intentionally not be smart and not apply myself in school. There were times when I hung out with kids who smoked cigarettes, so I would smoke cigarettes. There were times when I hung out with kids who were smart, who applied themselves. I did that too. That was true for me through my entire life, and really through the midpoint of my career. Even in my professional life, I was afraid that my colleagues would think that I didn't belong with them.
That's such a powerful story. And I think it is something that resonates with a lot of people, no matter who they are, right? Because I think there's a amount of wondering if you do belong, and then trying to figure out how to make it so.
Right.
And I remember being in elementary school and doing some of the same things, right? So I was in some of in my town, or in North Carolina, where I grew up. And so there was the academically gifted type of program. And I remember qualifying for that program and going home and telling my parents that I'm not sure that I don't want to do that, because I wasn't sure that I was going to be accepted by the other kids that were in that program. And I can think of lots of other times during growing up into adulthood, career-wise, where that is a driving thought.
Yeah.
And you spend an enormous amount of energy trying to figure out how to make it work, right?
Yes, the amount of energy, that is so true. But that was my normal. Like, I didn't know any different, that I was always spending mental energy first gauging whether looking for cues from you, and then if I did feel like I belonged, then I had to remain on high alert to make sure that was still the case. I didn't realize how much mental energy I was spending on guard, and continually monitoring my environment. I actually had an experience at a stoplight that made me realize that this was where, like, almost all of my mental energy was going. And there was nothing major happening. It was not a traumatic experience. I was driving down Wade Avenue in Raleigh. Everything is fine in my world. I'm by myself. I had the windows down and I was singing a Dream Lover by Mariah Carey. And I pull up at a stoplight, and on this side of me is a car of Black women, and on this side of me is a car of white women. And at this stoplight, I freaked out because I didn't know whether I should try to be like the white women or the Black women. And it wasn't these women in the cars. It wasn't anything they were saying. It was my identity crisis at a stoplight where everything was great in my world. And all of a sudden I freak out because I don't know who to try to belong with. Wow. And that was the experience that led me to discover just how much mental energy I was spending trying to convince the rest of the world that I'm just like you. And at that stoplight, there was a voice in my head that said, "What about me, Wendy?" It was the first time I had heard that voice.
Wow.
So pulling away from that stoplight, I started to listen, to try to learn to listen to that voice and not the voice that says, "You don't belong here, you're different."
Wow.
Yeah.
That's incredible, because I don't know, it's very hard to think about those formative moments and really accept them in the time, right? So, you can often look back and say, "Oh, that was a fork, and I made a decision, and that took me where I was going to go." You don't always get to recognize those things in the moment like that, and so it's much more powerful when you can actually look at it and say, I've got to figure out how I go forward, right?
Yeah, exactly. So as I pulled away from that stoplight, and since then, I still have the voice that says you don't belong here and that you have to be the same as artists in order to belong. But at those times, I try to listen to the "what about me" message and me, because I know that it's not you saying that. I know that it's not you. That message isn't coming from you. It's coming from me. So I'm working on, and I'm doing pretty well right now, but I'm working on listening to that voice more so than the other one. And as I started doing that, the more I listened to that voice, the more I blossom. And the more energy I have to be who I am and not who I think you think I should be. And any of all of that mental turmoil. And it is so freeing. You mentioned the amount of mental energy that we spend on making sure we are safe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if you think about that in the around organizational culture, then I think in the book you have three pillars, right? And there are a number of I'll call them tactics or things within those pillars that that organizations can do. Some of them immediately to help people stop thinking so much about, do I belong, and trying to make themselves fit in, but open the organization towards that. So we certainly want to talk about those. It's very interesting for me because we started doing engagement surveys in our organization many years ago, and we recently did a post-COVID engagement survey, and then we've done another one in 2024. And one of the things that's amazing about our culture, because as you know, because we've known each other for a long time now, our organization grows by acquisition. So we integrate other practices into our organization. And in our latest engagement survey, more than 85% of the people in the organization, there's an organization of about 8,000 or so, felt that they could be their authentic self at work. And and we just got that result back, and which is
That's
again how these things are
wonderful.
starting to come together for me,
Yeah.
because that is definitely a sign that people have a sense of belonging in the
Yeah.
organization. So we when we talk about those pillars, we have um, respect and protection
Mm-hmm.
and
Connect.
connection,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
So let's talk about those, and let's talk about some of the things in each one of those categories that maybe people don't think about or should be thinking about more closely.
Okay. Well, as I got started, I got interested in what behaviors can create a sense of belonging, can contribute to a sense of belonging in organizations. I assumed that somebody had already answered that question. That certainly seemed like a no-brainer question to
Mm,
ask for me. What behaviors can contribute to helping artists feel like he belongs here? Um, and so I read everything. I kept searching for, reading this book, articles, blog posts, everything I could find. And the list was really varied and the list was really long. But what I saw emerge from all of those behaviors were themes that for employees to feel a sense of belonging, they need to feel connected to the people they work with,
mhm.
their peers, their leaders, their clients, or the people they support. And they need to feel connected to the organization. They need to feel respected. They need to feel like the skills that they bring, what they contribute, is seen as respected and valued by their peers and their leader. They need to see where what they do fits into the organization's goals and how it helps the organization achieve those goals. And employees need to feel protected. That's the safe to be who I am, to have a great day or to have a crappy day. Know that my colleagues and my leaders will support me in through sunny times and cloudy times.
Wow. And so if you're in an organization that is aiming then to have all of those three things in place, like what do you start thinking about from a connection perspective? Like
Mhm.
how do you drive that?
The way that I drive that is not to provide the answer, but
Hmm.
to ask the people in the community what they think. So, one of the most powerful things I've seen is that rather than me be the expert and provide a list of answers
Hmm.
to what behaviors build a sense of connection, I've designed a survey that asks a community, what's one thing that helps you feel connected to your colleagues or to your leader? And I I ask a series of 3 to 5 open-ended questions that gather answers from the people in that very community. And so to date, I have almost 4,000 survey responses. And those are from employees in all different kinds of organizations, all different levels in their career, all different positions, all around the world. So I have some data that says here are some of the most common behaviors that build a sense of belonging from a huge representative example. And I love sharing that information, but almost more important is what are the behaviors from what do your people say?
Mm.
Because they know best what makes them feel connected, respected, and protected. So when I go into organizations now, I'll administer the Belonging at Work survey. It's
Okay.
an anonymous survey,
Okay.
and it's very quick. It's you can name one thing that helps you feel connected to your colleagues. What often happens is that leaders think, many of us think, but I see this most with leaders, that it is complex, long-term behaviors, expensive behaviors that would require a 5-year cultural initiative, cultural transformation initiative
Hmm.
in order to improve a sense of belonging in our workplace. But the answers from your own community will show you that it is simple things like when my boss maintains his one on one meetings with me, even though I know he's really busy. when he continues to guard and honor the time that he gives to me, the attention that he gives me, even though I know he's really busy. Or when my colleagues ask me how my weekend was,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So hearing that from your own people helps you realize it is really simple behaviors that contribute to a sense of connection, respect, and protection.
And so if you're thinking about um, what's really difficult to implement versus what you could turn on tomorrow, are there things that are just very difficult long-term type things that people really should start working on today? Or are most of the things really things you could start in the short order to make the cultural change?
One of the things that I was really intentional about as I got interested in this research is because I saw a gap in what was available for the largest audience in an organization, the frontline worker.
Mm-hmm.
I decided I wanted to focus on behaviors that were accessible to any
I
employee
see.
anywhere. It doesn't mean that these behaviors aren't available for leaders. Doesn't mean that they don't have to become part of an initiative, but the behaviors are available to any employee who has a workplace BFF, a work buddy who is feeling unappreciated, is kind of starting to check out,
Yeah.
and that person wants
Yeah.
to do something.
Mm-hmm.
I my friend is saying that she feels invisible and that nobody cares what she does. I want her to know that I care. So I've identified, and the research that I've been doing identifies behaviors that are available to every employee. The key, I think, is that employees want to see that they matter,
Mm-hmm.
and that
For
they're
sure.
not just an employee number, that they are not just a person who produces X number of widgets or contributes X amount of dollars to the bottom line. But they want to see that they are seen, that they have a voice, and when they use their voice, others are listening, not necessarily agreeing with, but they are really listening.
Mm-hmm.
And what they do is valued, and they are safe to be who they are. They can express their being without fear.
And the research is ongoing.
Mm-hmm.
And so since you've published the book, are there things that you think of differently now versus when you were writing that have changed in your thought process around getting people to have that feeling of belonging?
One of the things I'm enjoying substantially is, while my focus was on the largest audience in an organization, I wanted to be able to equip frontline employees, any employee. I am doing a lot more work with leaders and organizations who are already very in similar spaces to where my eye doctor is, in that they've already identified behaviors. They are already reaching out to employees and getting pulse surveys and engagement surveys. But I love working with organizations that already have KPIs identified and they are measuring belonging. So I love working with those organizations to identify for their leaders, their senior leaders, their emerging leaders, what behaviors they can model to the people that they interact with at a 360 level, where they can model the behaviors that build, connect, respect, and protect.
And what I find really interesting is that as you think about this organizational culture and the behaviors in organizations, we learn a lot of these things before we're part of the organization, and you get to touch on that now with your work at Duke University because you have the opportunity to work with people before they're actually within organizations, right? Can you
Right.
talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, it's a lot of fun because in this case, I'm an adjunct professor. I teach leadership and management in high-tech industries as part of Duke University's graduate engineering programs. So the class that I teach is a core class for all of the engineering graduate programs. And we essentially call it the People Lab. This is where tomorrow's engineers learn the importance of being able to work with other people, whether it's as a leader by position, or even if they're on a team. So much of the work that we do today is as a team member, whether they are a team lead or a member of a team. Essentially, it's being able to get along with other people, to lead them, to influence them, to listen, and to be able to handle conflicts or disagreements as they come up.
That is essential. I mean, it's what we face every day whenever we're dealing with people that we work with, but even people that you're not working with that you're encountering, right? It's highly unusual, though, I would think, that a program that is designed for engineers would include this piece. How did this all come about? Because it just seems like it may be unique in the country, in the realm of educational opportunities for engineers.
Well, it is one of the few programs that has this as a core class. So my understanding is that one of the programs at Duke is a master's in engineering management. It's kind of business school meets engineering. And it's designed for people who know they want to be on a manager track or a leader track, or potential entrepreneurs. So who will have to be interacting with people. And in that program, that's where my class started. And it makes sense.
I see.
In that program. What the administration found is that the students from the Master's in Engineering Management program were getting hired more quickly, they were getting promoted more quickly, and they were seeing more career success more quickly. So the other graduate programs said, well, we want our students to have that kind of success. And so it became a core class for all of the engineering graduate programs.
Well, that's pretty incredible. That's pretty incredible. And it's a skill set that it really does not come naturally. You have to think about it. You have to work on it.
Right.
You have to practice, right?
Yes.
And so having that as an opportunity while you're learning your profession is an amazing opportunity to have.
It is. And it's funny because I actually exclusively teach students who are not in the engineering management program. So I have the students who are in all of the other engineering graduate programs. And for them, as a required class, some of them may have wanted to take the class, but many of them probably would not have chosen to take this class. So it is fun to see throughout the semester their understanding of just how much people skills come into play as they are being interviewed for internships, for jobs, as they are dealing with teams. A lot of the work that they do in my class is team focused. So we're dealing with competing priorities and competing schedules, and they get a lot of practice in dealing with it, and they start seeing that they have to interact with people and learn how to influence people in lots of ways. So they realize how important and far-reaching the skills that they are learning really are.
So, we are living now in a world where there's kind of a push-pull around helping people belong and be part of a team, whether that be organizationally or societally, right? And in this conversation, it's helped me to think about there's also two pieces to belonging. There's the self piece, like the piece that I need to work on for myself so that I understand how I do belong or fit into whatever it is organizationally or into that societal piece. And then there's the piece that others need to do in order to make sure that they are providing the right environment, or at least let's call it a non-hostile environment for people to be able to become part of that world, right?
Yeah.
And so in a world that's where we are, where we're kind of push-pull, things kind of shift one way and then radically shift the other. If I'm an individual and I am thinking about how to address belonging within myself, what are some of the things I should think about?
Couple of things that I think about when I walk into a situation and all of a sudden have this wave of, oh, I don't know if I belong here. I think about connecting. I have just in the last few months um, tapped into connect, respect, and protect from an inward focused
Mm-hmm.
approach where I can, if I walk into a situation and get that wave of questioning whether I belong here, I can connect with my own core values, and that helps me feel more rooted, where I find that I start questioning whether I belong when I start thinking more about what I think you're thinking.
Mm-hmm.
When I start
Mm-hmm.
climbing into your head or anybody else's head, I start questioning whether I belong. And so for me, connecting with my own core values and my own core helps me sort of climb back into my own head, and not. Some of it might be comparing. Comparison often is if I start comparing myself to other people in the room, all of that. Uh, not a lot of good can
Good does
come
not
from.
come
Yeah,
from that, right?
exactly.
Yeah.
So connecting to my own core values and my own shifting my focus inward. I think about doing something to soothe my spirit. Oftentimes, like I am a confident person. I am a confident woman. And so sometimes when I get this question of, do I belong? I could bop myself over the head. Come on, Wendy, you're a confident person, so I could bop myself and jump, berate myself for, why are you worried about what other people, but at that time, I need to soothe my spirit and say,
Yeah.
it's okay. Everybody wants to belong, and we sometimes question whether we belong. It is okay to do that. So I do something to soothe my spirit. I think about, I often will ask myself questions like, is that really true? Really? Is it, and not a judgy, not like a, come on, really, Wendy,
Right.
but is it really true that these people are looking at me, because they're not.
Yeah.
They're not.
It's the hardest thing.
It
It is really
is.
hard sometimes to realize that that's not the case, right? But it's one of those things that once you actually are able to do that internally, it does make a world of difference.
Yeah.
And I there was something that I was reading that you mentioned that simple things like asking others to be included in the conversation or their opinion about things
Mm-hmm.
is really, it's just really easy to do. But as you do that, people get a sense of belonging and they start to
Exactly.
feel like, okay, I am
Mm-hmm.
important because they've asked me now to
Right.
give an opinion.
Yes.
And so it kind of cuts both ways, right? So you have to figure out how not to internalize or worry so much about fitting into the group, but other people, yourself, you have to also be willing
Mm-hmm.
to accept or invite other people into the
Right.
group so
Yes.
that we get this communal thing going so that people can always feel
Yes.
like they've got that opportunity.
Yeah, it is. It can be reciprocal. It can be as simple as when we walk into a room, like if we're at a social gathering and there are people at tables, from the environmental perspective, if you want to focus on helping someone else feel like they belong, you can invite them to come sit at your table.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, you want to sit next to me? You know how good that feels when
Yeah,
somebody invites you to sit next to them, whether you know them or not. They're just like,
that's right.
they see you and they would like to, they're making this invitation. The invitation, whether it's accepted or not, maybe you're coming in there and you're already knew that you were going to sit next to someone specific. So even though you don't accept the invitation, just having made the invitation makes you feel good.
That's right.
And it makes me feel good for having made the invitation. And so that's a really simple example of the reciprocity, kind of the push and pull.
Well, I feel like we've all got work that we can do for ourselves,
Mhm.
right? So both understanding where we sit and the energy we are using that we could be
Mm.
applying somewhere differently, but also those small things that you take for granted that if you were to do those things, people could really use their energy for better and
Exactly.
more things, right?
Yes.
So as we've talked about this, I think it's really important for people to figure out how they find you because I want them to be able to find the book. If you're speaking, I want them to be able to find you. So where do people look for you, Wendy?
You can look for me on LinkedIn. I'm pretty prolific on LinkedIn. So you can look for my profile. My website is wendygatescorbett.com. You can find me there as well.
Awesome. And now that I've been thinking about the kind of the threads that have been drawn through some of these conversations, I think I want to be really brave and try to get several of the guests to come back and we can have a larger
Oh
discussion
my gosh.
because there have been some very, very interesting points of view
Mm-hmm.
around this particular topic
Mm-hmm.
and very closely related topics. And I think it could be a really good discussion.
I would love to be a part of that discussion.
That would be awesome. So stay tuned because if I have my way, that's going to be one of the things that we get to do in 2025.
Wonderful. Wonderful.
Thank you again for coming and sitting with us today. I think this is going to be amazing for a lot of people, and I look forward to getting the comments and hearing what people think about the conversation.
I do too. I can't wait.
If you've made it this far, then I have to thank you for your time. I hope you've learned something new and enjoyed listening to the discussion as much as I enjoyed having it. I'd love to hear from you about the show because we're working really hard to bring you great content and the feedback really helps us get better. If you like what you've heard or watched, for those of you who are streaming out on YouTube, then take a split second to give us a thumbs up or a like. It really helps other people like you find the show too. And no one likes to miss out on the good stuff, so go ahead and subscribe and hit the notification bell so you don't have to wonder when or if there's a new episode. And until next time, stay remarkable.